All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours with Cloud Posse, your weekly dose of insider DevOps trends, AWS news, and Terraform insights, all sourced from our sweetops community, plus a live Q&A you can't find anywhere else. It's November 13th, 2024. I'm your host, Eric Osterman. Real quick, I'm the founder and CEO of Cloud Posse. We're a DevOps accelerator for AWS infrastructure that helps teams deploy their software faster. And we do this by leveraging our over 200 Terraform modules that have been battle tested and download over 100 million times. So no matter where you find your team on this journey, we're here to help you out. Go to cloudposse.com/meet. Again, cloudposse.com/meet. Answer a few quick questions, and you'll book a meeting with me directly. So how can you maximize today's session? First off, our format is informal. Engage as much as you'd like, ask questions. And if you're curious about any of our open source tools or modules, go for it. For those on the recording, we host these calls live, so don't miss out. Join us by going to cloudposse.com/officehours. Again, cloudposse.com/officehours. I do have one ask. If you find any portion of today's office hours valuable, please go ahead and share it with your team. Just head over to youtube.com/cloudposse, where you'll find the recordings posted typically in a few hours. So with that said, let's see what we have that caught my attention this week. All right, so the first one was something that I just discovered a few minutes before this call, relating to actually, well, yeah, both kind of related to each other. So how did I bring this up? So there's a issue affecting one of my pull requests that I opened against the Cloud Posse documentation. And this is actually a screenshot relating to part of it, except for it doesn't show the part that has the problem. But it's that now Copilot can actually respond to questions in the chat. And this is, if you are in GitHub Enterprise, some trouble here. This is if you're on GitHub Enterprise and you have Copilot, then you can get immersive updates inside of your pull requests. Unfortunately, they don't do a really good job promoting this feature in the latest thing. And when I click on this, it wants me to upgrade, and yet we get it. So that's all I can tell you right now because that announcement is bungled.
So I just used this earlier today, and so far all the answers have been wrong,
Yeah.
but it's nice idea. So it seems like maybe eventually it could be really useful, but I would say right now don't rely on it, and that might be why they're not promoting it yet.
The
As
reason
someone who's
I
been
find
using, I've been using Olama locally in VS Code, and you need to pick your model and blah blah blah. I found that to be a much more reliable, much faster. I can feed it better context. In my opinion, that it works great.
It's just a little bit more involved. Actually, that relates to the next thing I'm going to show here, but it is on the command line. Would you have it some way integrated to your GitHub pull requests, and you can just you know, it's all the context, right? I don't have to feed it all this context to be able to answer my question.
So I'm actually migrating everything from GitHub to GitLab now because yes, it can look at GitLab. It can look at all my repos as context.
Interesting. So I want to get back to that in 1 minute. I just want to jump back one other thing, because when Copilot was first announced with GitHub, I believe we talked about this on Office Hours as well, and it was a funny observation that Matt Calhoun brought up on the team, which was when you look at some of the answers that it was giving in their demo in this press release, they were the wrong answer. Like, Matt, do you remember that one? It was something like, give me validate that this is a URL. And the regex in the example was actually an incorrect regex for validating a URL. And this is in their press release. So it's just kind of funny that, Dan, you said this about this latest feature. All right. So wait, Olama, I thought that was just one of the language models.
Oh no, Olama is it's super easy. It's like Docker pull Olama, then you maybe 50 characters to download a model. And then you can, depending on what kind of hardware you're running it on, like you can run multiple models at a time. So like if you click down, like it does it all I mean, I'm Linux, so I did it in the command line. But so I have mine running Llama 2, Gemma 2, and a couple other different models. The Gemma 2 does really well with code, especially as I've given it more context.
And with Olama, it gives you like a desktop-like experience.
Oh, so there's two parts to it. So Olama is the LLM backend, and then Open Web UI is the front end that connects to, So Open Web UI, yep. And then like it looks just like it. The only thing that I had to do different in my setup, and see like how you can point it to search to the web live here too. I had a problem with the setup where I just had to disable authentication to get it to run the first time, which was just a different Docker flag. But because I'm just running it on my local workstation, that didn't bother me. But because you can take this now and there are VS Code plugins. There are several. So you kind of have to pick the one that works for you, that lets you point to your Olama distribution as your LLM. And the different add-ons, some of them, give you live feedback. Some of them wait for you to ask it a question. I have found, just as an example, that by doing it this way, I never have to write a regex again, and that's like the happiest moment in my career because I trust the regex that comes out of my LLMs because I've used them and they've worked. So now you're making me second guess that I've put all my faith in them lately. But
is this something that one can, so you can use it locally, like you said, in a container. If we wanted to do this and run it alongside like our public documentation and train something, would that be relatively straightforward?
So this is more for inferencing.
Okay.
If you want to train something, this isn't the best tool. There's you can add in like a RAG here. You can add in context. You can modify the token sizes. You can do a lot of that. But if you want to train something, don't do it this way.
Yeah, that I can understand. I conflated the two, if you will, in the way I framed it. If we had something trained, however we do that, could this be a public web UI that we host somewhere to make it easier?
Yes, it could.
Okay.
Yes, it could.
Can it be embedded as well? Can you literally like iframe it kind of, or is there some,
Yeah, because you're just pointing to your Olama server. So if you go like pip import Olama, you can write your own Python code to interact with the LLM backend and do whatever you want it to do. So if you don't want to use Open Web UI, you can build your own thing.
Right. I'm looking for the shortest path. I'm not looking to reinvent.
Shortest path, yes. And you can set this up so people can have accounts. You can set this up so that it like if you want to make it multi-tenancy, multi-user-ish, like I don't know what you're looking for, like you could do it this way. I haven't found a great way to like scale the back end yet, but I'm still dabbling. So the only way I can conceive of scaling the back end is having multiple behind a load balancer, multiple Olama servers behind a load balancer. So which is fine, but just not maybe the best. But I've been doing this for a couple months now. This is how I've been using LLMs to help in my coding. And like for smart home nerds like me, like this ties into Home Assistant really well, and you can do some really cool things in Home Assistant.
Tied in with Home Assistant?
Oh yeah, and it does some really cool things in Home Assistant.
What are you
can
doing?
ask your house some pretty awesome questions now. I will say that it differs from Alexa in Alexa has better context. So when I'm in a room, if I say turn off the lights in here, she knows where I am.
Yeah.
It's getting this to understand that type of context is a little bit harder. It's usually just easier to say, please turn off the lights in George's office, or whatever the room is named, as opposed to her trying to infer where I am. So I mean, there's differences like that, but none of them are deal breakers for me.
Yeah. I mean, isn't that why I guess the Home Assistant organization is building their own Alexa
Yes.
device of some kind? And
Yes,
then
and that's
you would know, right? It would
I'm using Olama as my backend for my locally hosted version of that
okay.
as
Very-
well. Mhm.
Anyone else using this stack or related? Michael, you're nodding your head. You tried that out as well?
Yeah, I use that similarly. That was I wrote a tool that kind of harnesses Olama on the back end, and it actually basically goes through, looks at your Terraform code, finds unused parameters, and then basically asks Olama, hey, which should I enable? And then you can add prompts to it. So I could be like, I want it to be more secure. I want my code to be more secure. Which parameters should I enable on this? So that was just kind of like one fun usage, but yeah, Olama's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I remember you released that tool recently, right? We didn't talk about it yet. What was that one called?
Oh yeah, I call it Cusco because you're
Cusco?
talking llama.
All right, so that's the one to check out if that sounded interesting.
That comment made my whole week right there. That was awesome.
Cool. Yeah, you're really cranking out a lot of projects lately, Michael.
I'm having fun with it. AI makes cranking out projects pretty easy.
Yeah, cool. All right, let's see what was next on my announcements. Anything more on that before I move on? All right, so the next one was related to the previous one on Copilot support, but also that the GitHub CLI apparently can access Copilot, which I didn't know. Now, given some of the accuracy concerns raised earlier, maybe that's not that exciting, but curious if anyone has already kicked the tires on this or used this in some way.
So if you have a Copilot license, you can basically just run this from CLI, correct?
Yeah.
Cool. This looks like a pretty good way to have it like generate commit messages for you since it can do an explain, but I will have to try it out.
Well, yeah, but this is an explain on a command you're giving it. It's kind of like, can you explain the okay, yeah, explain git diff or the output of git diff or something.
That's exactly what I'm thinking. I'm gonna have to try it out. Quick question on the last link that you shared for Copilot. In terms of pricing, do you folks pay for the enterprise or do you do one of the lower tiers? I noticed it's about $40 an additional user on enterprise.
But unlike a lot of SaaS subscriptions, what I respect about GitHub on this is they allow us to turn this on. Like, hey, we have 40 seats. I don't have to turn it on for 40 seats. I can turn it on for 1 seat, or two, a few seats. So right now we are not full tilt into Copilot, and yeah, we just.
Oh, sorry, wasn't referring to the number of seats. Were you able to use a lower tier plan, or do they force you on enterprise if you're on enterprise?
Oh, good question. That I don't know.
Okay, yeah, no worries.
Because you got us to upgrade to GitHub Enterprise.
Yeah, I'm kind of regretting that with this pricing, but yeah, we'll probably just have to bite it. But that's great that you don't have to do it across the whole org, but still, it's like twice the subscription of the actual license. So yeah,
it gets really pricey. Not to mention that's not the only AI product you're probably paying for, in addition to OpenAI, ChatGPT, and we just started paying now for Notion and Notion AI. And,
Slack as well has an AI feature. One quick comment from earlier, you guys are talking about the Open UI. I'm using POE, POE.com. think it's from Quora. I heard it was their attempt to reinvent themselves to be an AI company. I don't know how true that is, but what I do like about the service is it lets you access a bunch of different models at a flat rate. So I've been able to cancel ChatGPT entirely, just use POE, and they have their own credit token-based system, but it gives you access to all the different models, which I find helpful. So if I want to, rather than open up a new tab and sign it for new service or using free tiers, I've just been able to do it on one interface.
One thing that I find myself using all the time, which I'm curious if it works for you in that model, I only discovered this when I tried to do the same thing through Zapier, which is when you use ChatGPT, the service, you can give it pretty much any URL and ask to summarize it or take data out of it and things like that. But when you use the APIs for ChatGPT or OpenAI, that functionality is not available. So if this PO is using the APIs, you wouldn't be able to do some of those things.
Yeah, it is, I believe, using the APIs. So that sounds like a con, but the benefit that I could think of is supposedly you don't have the same context window limits that you're getting when you use ChatGPT web UI directly. So I believe all their integrations are all through the API layer, which supposedly have more functionality in some ways, like the context window, but I guess less functionality because you can't fetch the URL.
Yeah. Lately the context window hasn't bothered me too much. So it must have gotten quite large on the web, but I don't know what it is.
Yeah, I heard they increased it. So, but the other thing was I was using ChatGPT sometimes and then go to Claude and then go to Gemini. And
Yeah.
I actually don't know if Gemini's in here, but I was definitely swapping back and forth between Claude and ChatGPT.
Yeah.
All of which are available in Ollama, just as a side plug.
Oh, cool.
And what was the announcement this past week with VS Code now? Doesn't it, or is it GitHub Copilot? Doesn't it support now multiple models as well?
I recall hearing about that. Sorry, good.
No. I was just going to say, I think that it's an interesting thing because VS Code now has pushed back against Cursor, kind of forking them and then introducing all these native like AI capabilities. So I know that they definitely integrated. They said that they're going to integrate with like multiple models that are going to be pluggable, but also in a one-upsmanship thing. For a while, Eric, I think if you remember, I told you I really enjoyed using Super Maven, and then I came across Cursor and I really like them. But then Cursor just acquired Super Maven, so they're going to combine them both in Cursor. So it's I'm very happy for that. So here's their the link to their blog. Just happened like a couple days ago.
Yeah, this was what I was thinking about. And Matt, so if I'm reading this correctly, this is, a shot at taking away some of the value of Cursor by doing it. Okay.
Yeah, so Cursor's main model is the whole Claude series of models. That was what they were using, but now and this was basically GitHub, I think, or whatever, Microsoft pushing back and saying like, okay, we're going to add some of this functionality right to VS Code, and then Super Maven has like a extremely developer trained model, like or focused developer training model. So it's really for developing code and nothing better or nothing more than that. And then and it's super fast, which there you go. There's their there's their advertisement for that. And now they now essentially Claude, I mean not Claude. Now Cursor acquired them basically to bring that into like native functionality of Cursor.
Got it.
Okay, now I'm going to make another comment here. This looks awesome. But I will say I'm also a grad student working to get my master's in computer science. They would never teach this in school, ever.
I mean, they don't teach kids coming out of school how to use Git either. It's pretty
True.
dumb. So
But
like, you know.
Yeah. I mean, like if I were to show one of my professors this, I'd think it was cool and they'd look at it and like with horror, I'm sure. Like I can look at it though and think, wow, that would make me work really fast when I'm doing certain things. And I don't know. I just don't like the disconnect between business and education. Like, teach us how to do stuff the way we're going to do it at work.
Oh, this is evolving so quickly. I mean, it's going to have to end up that we're there. I think that
Yes.
education is still trying to figure out how to.
My coding tests are still handwritten.
Wow. Wow.
Yes.
That is complicated. I think we're just going to have to start testing on higher order problems than the fundamentals, just like, this is, the languages are abstracting the machine code underneath. Back in the day, machine code was taught. Now no one learns that anymore necessarily. And I think
we still learned that like 5 years ago.
Oh, yeah?
Or I guess 10, but yeah, no, we still had machine code and I never have seen it since.
Yeah. Did you write your own assembler too?
Yeah, just for in theory, and then never looked at it again after that class.
Yeah. So yeah, I think some of these things will be important to understand, one time the fundamentals, but you quickly progress past that and solve higher order problems.
Yeah, I once went on a job interview and I'm so bad at memorizing language syntax that they asked me to code something. And they asked me what language I was going to code it in, and I told them pseudocode, and they were like, "What?" They said you could pick any language that you want. So I just said, I'm going to do it in pseudocode. And they were like, why? And I was like, because I can't remember the exact syntactical language for any language I have, even all the ones I use all the time. I always make mistakes, or I'll whatever it is, hallucinate like ChatGPT does, and think like one language construct is for another language. And I guess it's because I have too many programming languages that I've worked in my head, so I can only write it in pseudocode. But they accepted it, and it made me an offer, so I guess it worked.
Oh, nice. I was thinking outside the box. I like that answer.
Yeah, I could, because I cannot memorize that. So paper tests would be really hard for me. I need an IDE and a compiler, or a debugger or whatever to actually make code work.
Yeah. Very cool. And these days you can just take that pseudocode and say, convert this to JavaScript. So
Yeah, and it will have 7 bugs in it, but it'll be all right.
But that's because you asked for it in JavaScript. So yeah.
Yeah, isn't it pretty good at JavaScript? At least ChatGPT, I feel like is.
I'm just biased against JavaScript, I think. So yeah.
I'm a big fan of JavaScript. I've used it for years and years and years, and I would consider myself as close to expert as you can be in JavaScript. And there are so many foot guns in language. If you're if you're just writing something small and hacking it together and whatever, but to truly get performant, secure, etc. code, it's very, very difficult on a large scale. So I don't know. I like the language a lot,
doesn't
but it's
follow the
hard.
do one thing and do it well mentality that I like to follow. It's trying to do everything kind of, and just have a philosophical problem with that.
All right. Next announcement I have was just something that I don't know where I saw it pop up, but it's basically a card game for cloud architecture by Amazon to practice putting pieces together in well-architected manners. It's useful for teaching cloud architecture, and I guess, for your fellow friends that can't get enough of this at work, you can now play this at home.
I have the weird look on my face because I see that the title is AWS for games, which would lead me to believe building games to run on top of AWS.
That's what I thought from that link.
Yeah.
in my
No. Go back to the screen that you're just on. The upper left-hand corner on the nav bar. AWS for games.
Yeah. Interesting. Not where, but they do have AWS services optimized for games, but
Yeah.
that would be a weird place to put this if that's the case. Yeah, maybe I'm totally misunderstanding this, but not the way I think about using AWS for games.
Yeah, agreed. That's why I was confused. It definitely looks like a brick and mortar board game, not some sort of technology stack.
If I brought
Yeah,
this
this
to
is-
game night, my friends would make me leave. Yeah.
I think you should try.
I got an 8-year-old's birthday. I'm gonna maybe give this to him. Start him early.
Yeah. And if you get good at this, you got a future job at Cloud Posse. Yeah.
Oh, I know I could definitely beat my kids in this game 100%.
I guess it's just trying to
Finally.
find a way to make tech fun, right?
Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah.
All right. So next announcement was just if any of you are using SST, they've added support for containerized deployments. This is a nice way that leverages CDK under the hood, among other things. And you can write basically declarative deployments in a formal programming language. Haven't used it myself. Has anybody else been using SST, the serverless?
I've kicked the tires a bunch on it. So that guy right there is Dax. That's his Twitter handle and everything. And they're actually the same people who maintain that open next project that I posted you that I directed you to for hosting Next.js on non-Vercel.
I remember. Yeah.
So same core teams kind of put it together.
Yeah, interesting. And I believe the framework only works with AWS, right? Or
Open Next, you mean, or
SST?
SST? I think they have other providers now.
Interesting. Here's a list of
Yeah, so there's Cloudflare that it definitely works with Cloudflare workers.
providers. AWS, Cloudflare, PlanetScale.
Yeah.
Cool.
It's definitely not as robust as some of the other things as far as its support, but I know that it worked with Cloudflare workers because I've kicked the tires with it on that.
Would you say it's competing with Pulumi?
I think it is really targeting it for you're an application developer, you're writing code, you don't want to be like a dev, like a DevOps kind of guy, but you just want to get your code launched. Like this is an easy way you can do it in the same language you're using to write code. I think that's kind of their. So they have all these primitives basically to spin up the things that a developer may typically need, like databases and queues and caches and CloudFront distributions and that kind of thing. Like it's meant to launch your app easily. It's not meant to define like full-blown like architectures and platforms that people then develop and push applications to. I think it's more just like has all the primitives for the things you would normally need to run an app.
All right, cool. Next announcement was something that caught my attention. I think it was trending on Hacker News, which I didn't realize that the way merging is done in the Git CLI was pluggable, if you will, and you can replace the command that it uses. So merge giraffe. I didn't realize that's what it was saying a second ago, but is one of these implementations that is actually language aware and can overcome a lot of the merging challenges that you wouldn't get with just regular basic diffs the way that Git normally works. So I thought that was pretty interesting. I haven't tried it out myself. Has anyone seen this or tried other tools now that I know that that is pluggable?
I've seen it, but I haven't used it.
Can we just have like a llama merge method now then that will just, you know, apply a little bit of AI and know exactly how to do these merges?
Good luck. That's some of the most complicated reasoning ever in my in my opinion, depending on what, you know, what language you're working in.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're they're showing it here, if you're programming in Rust, you already are a glutton for punishment, so I guess you're okay with it.
All right. Well, let's see here. Let's see. Solve two conflicts. Next announcement was something that I saw. You know, back in the day, definitely used wget a lot to mirror sites and documentation. Well, what if you could literally just mirror that site into documentation, if you will? So traverse an entire site and convert it to Markdown at the same time. Seemed like a pretty interesting idea. So that is what this tool does, HTML to Markdown. It'll convert a page or crawl an entire site and convert it to Markdown stored locally. Don't run it on Cloud Posse docs. We want you coming back. All right, next one. Anyone who has worked with Kubernetes and deployments has undoubtedly run into crash loops and backoffs. And then the first thing you tried to do was adjust that, and you realize that this is like hard coded into Kubernetes and there's no way to adjust it. And that's, you know, it's a pretty okay default, like if you're actively trying to deploy something. But if you were working with a service that maybe has been crash looping for a while, let's say, and you wanted it to come back, you're gonna have to actually basically redeploy that, because with the exponential backoff, it could be like trying it again in 2 hours. Now, they aren't seeking to make this, you know, exceptionally configurable. I forget where I saw that. Non-goals. But it is to make it, yeah, my understanding was still more configurable. And there's been recent activity on this proposal, and I can't recall if there was a PR associated with it or not that I saw that led me to it. But yeah, it's amazing the amount of, this is one small area of Kubernetes, right? And look at the depth of documentation that goes into planning one feature like this. It's remarkable.
I was do you know the guy, the pragmatic engineer? I can't remember his last name, George something. He publishes that blog, and it's like a newsletter. You can has paid subscriptions, and it's about enterprise software architecture and all those kinds of things. Well, there was an interview recently with a woman who was like a senior engineer at, I think, Google, Netflix, and somewhere else, and she was comparing and contrasting like how they work as far as like proposing changes and documentation and all of those kinds of things. And I think it was at Google where she said you couldn't even, if you tried to start a conversation to socialize like an idea with one of your coworkers, they would be like, where's the PRD? Like, you know, or where's the 2-pager that writes this up or whatever. Like if you didn't come with that to start out with, that was like the barrier to start a conversation. So this doesn't surprise me that this is the kind of thing we're seeing for Kubernetes, given who's leading most of this work.
Yeah. Pretty cool to see it all being done in the public, but yeah, takes a certain caliber of engineer and mindset, I guess, to do this. All right. Next topic was a post by none other than DHH announcing that Rails 8 will no longer require complicated PaaS to be deployed. That is because it seems like they're building it together with two of their other projects, one being Kamal and the other being Thruster, I believe, which is a load balancer that they built. So yeah, Rails, you know, what was the, you know, it's kind of like, you know, imagine if Puma was also now a PaaS at the same time. So just running it with that is all you need, and some compute to deploy your apps. I haven't been following any of this conversation, and obviously DHH has, you know, come out being very much in support of like the anti-cloud movement, if you will, and the anti-Kubernetes movement, and the anti-SaaS movement and PaaS movement, and you know, quite far out there. Has anyone taken a look at Kamal just outside of this? I'm curious, especially if anybody's you know, a big Rails developer still. I'd be curious if they're, you know, going in this direction or not.
I saw some quick highlights about it a few months ago when it first came out. The only thing that stood out to me was it supports Let's Encrypt, like within it, which seems like it should be a standard these days for most tools that support deployment. But I thought it was cool that it was all kind of baked in. But I don't write Rails, at least not by choice, so I haven't kicked the tires on this yet.
Yeah, not anymore. Yeah, that's a can of worms, and Let's Encrypt. You know, really excited and bullish about it when it came out, but the rate limits make it very difficult in our experience to use with things like preview environments, which we also want TLS for. But
yeah, we're using Let's Encrypt for our previews, and we've been doing wildcard certs underneath the subdomain, so we've dedicated a subdomain to it. But when we do some of our dev workflows, when we spin up a lot of stuff and then tear it down, we've hit the limits at the higher level of the top level domain. And so, yeah, you can request rate limit increases. We haven't gone that far yet, but if you submit a form to Let's Encrypt, they will supposedly increase your rate limit if it's for a good use case. By default, I think you could reorder the same cert for a top level domain, and that includes its subdomains like 50 times a week. Or 50 new domains per week, I believe. Or actually, you've got it right up here, I think. But they've got a form on there. I could link that to you if that's something you're looking for.
yeah, well, I'd like to be aware of it at least. Here, rate limiting form.
Single garage door closing.
So it's good to be aware of.
If you're using the Acme protocol, you could also use another provider like Google. Yeah, Google Cloud supports certs now. So using Google Trust Services, I believe. And I believe you can just provision, so you create like a GCP account, and then you could basically avoid the rate limits. We didn't want to go down using another Acme provider. I personally have liked that with Let's Encrypt, you don't have to deal with any authentication or anything. You just deal with your DNS auth, but not have to deal with if you're to use a GCP version, you'd have to authenticate to GCP and then pay them per certificate. The cost isn't high, but it's more managing those keys as part of your workflow.
That's interesting. I didn't know that Google Cloud supported the Acme protocol.
And there's one more, Zero SSL, which I believe
Yeah,
supports.
we
But you need
unfortunately recommended that to a customer, and they unfortunately found out that it doesn't really work. Yeah, very unreliable service for generating the certificates, and not maybe perfect compatibility with Cert Manager. I believe the state they're at right now, you have to reboot or restart Cert Manager or something every now and then.
Got it. We haven't used it in over a year. Once we got Let's Encrypt going, we've just been on that, minus running into those small headaches of too many orders within a short period of time.
Yeah. So does Cert Manager support Google Cloud?
I believe it just supports the Acme protocol. So I assumed you could.
It was just that when you said auth, though, because then they would have to.
Yeah.
So static credentials. Oh, it supports service accounts. For the service account. Okay, static credentials for a service account.
So I think there's two sides to it. One is you have the DNS authentication, then you have the Acme provider authentication. So I don't know if this is referring to the DNS side, like Cloud DNS from GCP versus the Acme provider authentication. I think the Acme provider authentication, I believe that's a standard interface, but I might be mistaken.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, learned something new. Thanks. Let's see. Next that I had was a small little announcement for Atmos. If you're using Atmos, then you might like this feature. So Atmos is our framework for Terraform automation, if you will. And one of the conventions we've had at Cloud Posse for a long time in all of our Terraform modules is to add an enabled flag. So this makes it very easy to enable or disable via code some portion of your infrastructure or modules. We decided to carry that functionality into Atmos itself. So now you can enable or disable a component in a stack. It's a little different from the variable that we implement in our Terraform, which will actually be destructive if you set it to false. With this feature, it's like disabling it from management by Atmos. So you can provision something with Atmos and then tell Atmos not to manage it anymore. And that's what the enabled flag for a component will do. And so that's just something that you would add to the metadata of a component if I still have that PR open. So. Next announcement is, yeah, if AWS, is too expensive for you and you can't afford to get the additional SaaS subscriptions that you need to run on AWS, there's an option now for you. If you're in the US, you can finance that. So that's something they're running out now in collaboration. I forget who's the bank doing the financing here, PNC.
It'd have been great if it was somehow Affirm was there. I don't know if Affirm is a bank, but I always see that on everything.
Yeah, that's what you'd expect it to be like, yeah, showing up here. Check out with Affirm.
Yeah, they're like a micro loan platform.
Yeah.
I
So
think
yeah,
they're backed by
they don't do 10,000 to 100,000 probably. Wait, no, is that 100? Oh my God.
Yeah, that's 100 million.
I was gonna say 10,000 to $100,000. Wait, there's an extra set of zeros there.
Well, this is so you can basically buy SAP and your SAP implementation through the AWS marketplace.
Got it.
for like large organizations. That's why the number is so big.
Yeah. No, clearly, I
Yeah,
realize
yeah.
not geared towards Cloud Posse and buying data through the marketplace. No, 100 million. All right. Any other announcements, or we move to Q&A? All right, let's go to Q&A. Any questions we can get answered this week? This is the open-ended portion of our weekly office hours. If you have any things that you're trying to solve and would like to get the input of others, please bring it up. Or we'll just end it a little bit early today then. No questions. All right. Well, I do have one question. Going back to the Olama discussion and so forth, related to a question that was brought up last week or 2 weeks ago about, how to index kind of all the knowledge around your company and make that accessible. And we talked about there's an open source solution called Danswer. We haven't tried it out ourselves. They're now backed by Y Combinator, not backed by, well, backed by them, but also in Y Combinator, accelerator. So this is pretty cool. I'm just wondering, and then I was looking at Algolia, seeing if they've caught up with this whole AI movement, and can I deploy something like a chatbot with Algolia, since they already index all of our documentation, and didn't look like they had anything for that yet. So if we wanted to create something like the ChatGPT experience for our documentation, what is the best way of doing that these days? Is there an easy solution that is either open source or not prohibitively expensive?
Did you ask ChatGPT?
I did not. And I mean, the route I was going with ChatGPT was like, you can create your own custom GPTs pretty easily, and you can, add data to it. But yeah, I felt like, well, and I don't believe you can embed ChatGPT on a site, right?
I
And I know you
mean,
say that facetiously too, but
You cannot. You have to
no.
use the API.
Yeah, I was actually asking if you had asked ChatGPT if there is a service that does that for you.
yeah.
I wasn't saying it facetiously. It's usually pretty good at that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I will try that after this call, see what my answer is. And I wonder what this, I wonder how expensive this is as a managed service, if they offer that. 16 months per seat. That's not too bad.
I saw that Spacelift just started implementing like a new in website chat, and they're using Pylon for it, but that's like the furthest extent I've looked into it.
Interesting. Did you, yeah, you didn't have any conversations with it?
No, not yet.
So it's overall for customer support?
Yeah, towards the bottom, it talks a little bit more about automating with AI. But I don't know. I just saw that they implemented it pretty recently.
Yeah. That's cool.
Hmm.
check out what I posted in the chat there.
Oh, you asked.
I asked. It gave me what looks like some legitimate answers.
Yeah, DocsBot. Document 360.
I mean, DocsBot sounds exactly like what we want.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I'll check those out. Let's see. Hmm. Yeah. Sounds like a reasonable thing to try out.
The trusted by also has some legit companies in it, if that's real.
Yeah. Oh, that reminds me. There was something else I didn't have on the announcements. Sentry, was it fair source? Yeah, we had, I think we did. No, I don't know that we announced that they were adopting the fair source, did we? The related post that I was thinking of was last week we talked about, or the week before, thanks.dev, which is making it easier for companies to contribute to the open source comprising their supply chain, essentially, which is nice. This is honestly what GitHub should be doing with their GitHub sponsors, is just make it a lot easier to support and pay back to the open source that they depend on. But they also have on their blog, I forget what it is, but kind of a framework, if you will, for how you might want to approach donations to open source. And giving a certain number of, like, was it $5,000 per year per full-time developer that you have, or something like that?
Yeah, I think it was 2K.
2,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds right. So then, yep, go on.
No, go ahead. Finish your thought.
Oh, no, so all I was going to say was Sentry then has a blog post about how they're supporting open source. I believe they came out in support of saying they're donating $750,000 this year.
Yeah, and I think that they actually use the 2K per like metric. I think that's how they came to it. Yeah, they have 129 or so. They did 5,800 per developer, I guess, on their thing. I remember seeing it was like a certain number per developer per year or whatever that they used. But
Yeah.
I was gonna say I saw I saw a funny tweet. If you go back to that top, the thanks.dev thing, and they have the top donors, and I saw that so syntax is on the right column there, the third one down. So they gave about 40,000 or whatever, and I saw a funny tweet exchange that someone, I don't remember who it was, somewhere in their list ended up with like $1 a month, and they were like, "Oh, gee, thanks, syntax," or whatever. And then they were like, "Well, it was an algorithmic thing that they decided to give like this whole amount," and it was some like well-known like company, and they had a little like back and forth, and they said, well, we value you a lot more than that. Let me see what we can do or whatever. And then but somehow the algorithmic like allocation of it based on the supply chain thing gave them like $1 a month or something like that. I kind of laughed at that whole thing.
Yeah. Interesting. Oh, that's cool. Tesla Motors. I didn't realize they.
I think that's a
Oh, what
like
if?
a what if they each donated $1 million a year.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's showing you if they donated $1 million a year, how much each of those projects would get.
Interesting.
I'm
Anyways,
sure,
it's cool.
sure Tesla can't afford $1 million a year in open source donations,
Definitely not.
or Microsoft or whomever.
Yeah. Well, I like that somebody's trying to solve this problem, so that's cool. Because there's been a lot of talk that needs to be solved, but that, talk's cheap. So. All right. Well, let's see. Before I wrap things up here, any final thoughts or questions? All righty. Well, thanks everyone for participating. We'll be posting a recording of today's session to our YouTube channel. Go to youtube.com/cloudposse. It's a great way to share this knowledge with the rest of your team or anyone else who might be interested. If you're interested in working with Cloud Posse to help you modernize how you approach Terraform infrastructure at your company, go to cloudposse.com/meet and answer a few quick questions, book a meeting with me directly. Here are some action items you can take if you want to get more involved with our community. We have our office hours syndicated as a podcast. If you want to listen to that on the train or in the car, it's a great way to do it. Podcast.cloudposse.com is where to go for that. We have our Slack community. If you haven't joined, we participate heavily in the Terraform and office hours channels, AWS channels, and so forth. Go to slack.cloudposse.com. And we have, of course, these live and weekly office hours. We've been hosting them basically for 5 years and never missed a single Wednesday. Go to cloudposse.com/office hours. Again, cloudposse.com/office hours. And see you here next week. Have a great rest of your week, everyone. Take care.